I have 4 pieces to share with you tonight. The first, if you happen to have a stone chumash, it's not necessary, but if you happen to have one, we're going to start on page 544. Page 544. If you just have a chumash, which is also fine, it's the book of VaYikra, Leviticus, the 3rd book of the Torah, first Parsha, first chapter, first pasuk. VaYikra el Moshe, and God called to Moshe. Vayidaber Hashem elav me'ohel moed lema, and God spoke to Moshe from the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, with the following commandments, which we're going to learn about in this week's Parsha. I don't know if your Chumash indicates this, but if you look at the Hebrew word VaYikra, the first word, the last letter of the first word is an aleph, and the aleph is small. It's a miniature aleph. I don't know if it's indicated in the printed Chumash that you're looking at, but in the Torah scroll itself, the letter aleph is miniature. It's a miniature size letter, noticeably smaller than all the rest. It's called an aleph ze'era, a small aleph. Okay, why is the aleph small? So there are a number of different explanations. One of the classic explanations is given by one of the famous commentators, the Balaturim. And he says as follows. It's written small because the letter both is there and is not there. What's the difference? Well, it's 2 separate words. There's a word VaYikra with an aleph at the end, and there's a word VaYikar with no aleph at the end. Now, they both mean the same thing, and he called, meaning God called to Moshe, but there's a difference in the implication. The word VaYikar, without the aleph, implies God didn't make an appointment. It wasn't a set up thing. He happened to pass him on the street and he happened to engage him in a conversation. VaYikra means he called to him intentionally. There was an appointment. It was set up. It was official. It was formal. It was complete. The word VaYikar implies that the listener is not such an important person. If God wants to speak to someone and it's not really so important, the person's not so important, not deserving of honor, God will say VaYikar. He appeared to him, he spoke to him, but it wasn't any big deal. But to someone who is deserving of honor, of respect, God will say VaYikra. So, of course, God had respect for Moshe, who was a great, great person. And God said the word VaYikra with his full presence and formality. However, Moshe was a very humble person. And Moshe preferred that God would have written the word VaYikar as if Moshe was not really deserving of such honor and tribute from God. Even though that was Moshe's feeling, but God, of course, has the final say on what gets written in the Torah, and God said VaYikra. However, says the Balaturim, in order for God to eternalize that anyone who looks at the Torah forever and ever remembers this quality of Moshe, of how humble he was, God agreed to write the last letter, Aleph, miniature, as if to allude to the fact that Moshe himself did not really want it to be the big letter. He would have been satisfied without any aleph at all. So, according to the Balaturim, it is miniature because it's there and it's not there. Let me share with you another approach. This is an approach that I heard from Rabbi J.J. Schachter, a great scholar and teacher today. You know, today, of course, each of us is facing an unprecedented crisis. And so we struggle. If we are believing Jews, then we struggle. We have a lot of problems, a lot of questions. We believe in God. We trust in God. But we don't understand. We don't understand why this is happening. What kind of a plan is this? So on the one hand, we ourselves feel as if we are being called by God, VaYikra, the full word. God is calling us fully and clearly. God is present. God is with us. And the truth is that we want to feel the full formal presence of God. We want to feel that God is in charge and there is a plan. But the problem is we don't see it. And therefore, to our perception, we perceive, we experience that God is VaYikra. Everything is out of control. We don't understand. And so we write the word VaYikra with an aleph, but it's small because we're struggling with it. We write it with an aleph because it is true that no matter what it is that we see and what it is that we feel, there is a God, there is a plan, God's presence is with us. We assert that as a belief. So the word VaYikra with an aleph is the right word. But it's a small aleph because we're struggling, because we don't see it, because we don't understand it. And the size of that aleph for us is our avoda. That is what we need to be working on spiritually at this time. How do we increase the size of that aleph from almost disappearing the way we feel bereft and alone and uncertain? How do we grow our faith and belief and trust in God so that it's a big aleph, so that it's a regular size aleph, that God is communicating with us fully and embracing us fully? How do we go from the small aleph to the large aleph? Because on the one hand, we trust in God. We must trust God. But at the same time, we have to be honest. And we have to be genuine. And we have to be true to ourselves. And therefore, we need to validate our fears and the fears of others. And that's okay. It's okay to be afraid. But we still have to hold on to God. We still have to hold on to the aleph. And we need to be able to display our own vulnerability, our own struggling. So the aleph is there, but it's smaller. And it really captures the essence of what we are going through today. So here's a suggestion on how to try to achieve that. It's a story that I heard from Rabbi Meili Biderman about the Rambam, Maimonides, the great scholar who lived almost 900 years ago. Now, I must tell you that I've studied the life of the Rambam a long time. I never heard this story. That doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that I never heard it before. But the story goes like this. The Rambam Maimonides was a great scholar, one of the greatest scholars of his age. And in his adult and later years, he lived in Fostat, which is a suburb of Cairo. And he was the physician to the Sultan of Egypt. That was his job. He was a doctor. On the side, on Shabbos, he was a rabbi. Obviously, he was the doctor of the Sultan because he was extremely highly regarded. There was no greater doctor than him. However, the story that Rabbi Biederman told goes like this, that there were advisors to the Sultan who said to him, it's not appropriate that the Sultan should have a Jewish doctor. There are other doctors that are better and that are not Jewish. Why don't you take another doctor? Sultan said, well, but I like my doctor. He's the best doctor. So the advisor said, well, listen, why don't you have a contest to prove who's the best doctor? How do you do that? So the advisor says it's very simple. Here we have a candidate, a non-Jewish doctor. We think he's the best doctor. You have the Rambam. You think he's the best doctor. We'll do a test. Each of the doctors will give a cup of poison to the other. They will drink it. And if they're such a great doctor, they will be able to heal themselves from the poison that was given to them by the other doctor. All right. Sultan said, let's try it. So first, of course, the non-Jewish doctor takes a cup of poison, which obviously he has prepared to be as difficult to cure as possible, and he gives it to the Rambam. The Rambam drinks this poison, and through the tremendous skill and knowledge of the Rambam, he is able to heal himself. Amazing. The Rambam is then told to give a cup of poison to the non-Jewish doctor. So he takes a cup, gives it to the non-Jewish doctor, tells him to drink it. The doctor goes home. Nothing happens. Perfectly fine. Another day passes, nothing happens. Perfectly fine. A week later, the non-Jewish doctor died. So the Sultan called the Rambam. He said, you won. You get the job. You're the better doctor. Because his poison did not kill you, but after drinking your poison, he passed away. But the Sultan said to him, but could you just explain to me, how did you do it? What did you do that was so dangerous that the other doctor was not able to heal himself? So the Rambam says, let me tell you what happened. I didn't give anybody poison. I would never give anybody poison. You know what I gave him in the cup? It was a glass of water. But he thought I gave him poison. So when he did not die immediately, he went home and he thought to himself, well, the Rambam is a very sneaky person. Obviously, he's given me a poison that something is going to happen that is going to cause it to erupt and cause my death. But he didn't know what it is. Is it going to be when I go to sleep? Is it going to be when I wake up? Is it going to be if I'm standing? Is it going to be if I sit down? Is it going to be if I'm eating something? Is it going to be if I'm hungry? If I'm hot? If I'm cold? And this doctor was thinking to himself, knowing there had to be something that was about to happen to him, and he was so frightened and he was so afraid, he died out of fear. He died from anxiety. That's the story Rabbi Biederman tells. And the moral of the story is, we need to be careful about the guidelines. We need to observe health warnings meticulously. We need to be empathetic to those who are in pain and to the worries of others. But also, once in a while, we need to take a break from the news, and we need to take a break from Facebook. We need not to be consumed with the fear and anxiety of what's going to happen. It's serious. We have to pay attention to it, but we cannot be consumed by it, because if we are consumed by it, the fear and the anxiety itself will be, God forbid, as destructive as the illness. Okay, the second piece. So if you turn, please, to page 550, you will see a very interesting thing. And that is, near the bottom of the page, the Parsha is talking about karbanos, sacrifices. And every sacrifice had, along with it, a mincha offering. Mincha, this does not refer to the afternoon service mincha, it's a different mincha. This mincha was a bread offering. It was actually some kind of a cracker or like a pita, a different kind of dough mixture that was offered together with every sacrifice, a different one for every sacrifice. Some were crispy, some were soft. Okay. And the Torah says, near the bottom of the page, 550, it's chapter 2, Pasuk 11, at the bottom of the page, Kol hamincha asher takrivu l'Hashem, every mincha offering that you bring together with the carbon with a sacrifice, lo se'asa chametz, it's not allowed to have any chametz. Ki chol sa'ar v'chol dvash lo saktirim mimenu yishel Hashem, because anything that's chametz, or anything that has honey, is not allowed to be offered as an offering in the Beis HaMikdash. The reason for honey, we'll leave that for another time. But it's interesting, this is the source of all of the laws of how to bake matzah, because it turns out the entire Beis HaMikdash was kosher for Pesach all year long. There were two exceptions. There was one carbon called the carbon toda, and another carbon that was offered on Shavuos that was an exception. It was made of chametz. Why those exceptions exist is another discussion. But besides those two limited exceptions, all year long, the entire Beis HaMikdash was kosher for Pesach. But you should notice that there is a problem with that, because the mincha offerings in the Beis HaMikdash were mixtures of flour and oil, olive oil, not water. Now, if you remember the laws of chametz and matzah and how to bake matzah, you know that matzah is flour and water, nothing else, and it's got to be baked, made into a dough very quickly and put into the oven very quickly within 18 minutes in order to be matzah. But you may know, adding any other ingredient to matzah besides flour and water makes it not kosher for Pesach. So there is a product called egg matzah. I know many people are familiar with it. I understand that there are people who do have it on Passover, and I'm sure they do so because they are not aware of this. But egg matzah is not kosher for Pesach, because our sages said that in order to have a dough that does not start to rise or ferment, it must be only flour and water, and it must be less than 18 minutes from the time that the flour and water are mixed until the time it goes into the oven. That's what the Talmud tells us. So if adding any other ingredient besides flour and water makes it chametz, how could the mincha offerings in the Beis HaMikdash be offered and not be chametz? It was oil and flour. That would automatically invalidate it. So the answer to this question is explained in the Talmud. Talmud asks this and answers it. And the Talmud says, there's a principle, and it actually affects many areas of Jewish law. The principle is Kohanim Zrizim Hein. The Kohanim who served in the Beis HaMikdash, they were particularly punctilious and zealous and careful in the way that they did their work. So that for a normal person who would mix flour plus anything else, we are not certain they would be able to get it into the oven quickly enough so that it did not become chametz. That's why for a normal person, for Pesach, We require only flour and water, nothing else. We don't take any chances. The Kohanim were so careful, they could make a mixture of flour and even olive oil, and they were careful enough that it remained matzah and was not chametz. Okay. We don't rely on that for ourselves, of course. That's why, as I said, egg matzah or any other kind of matzah with something added to the dough is not kosher for Pesach. But even our own matzah requires this characteristic of zrizus, of haste, of enthusiasm, alacrity. If you ever had a chance to visit a matzah bakery, not this year, but if you've ever had a chance, or if you haven't gone, you should go in another time. Everyone's running around like crazy because it's a mad rush. From the moment the flour is added to the water, it's a mad rush to knead the dough and to roll it out and to make it into the shape and to put the holes and to put it in the oven. People are running. I mentioned to you before, I think it was last week, the connection in the pasuk between the word matzah and the word mitzvah. The Torah says, "Ushmartem es hamatzos," which literally means you should guard the matzah to make sure that it does not become chametz. That I mentioned to you last time is the source of the practice to have shmura matzah that is guarded, where the wheat is guarded from the time that it is harvested so that it does not come into contact with moisture. But our rabbis interpret the word matzos, which are the same letters as if it was the word mitzvos, commandments, in order to say just like a person has to act with alacrity and quickness and enthusiasm in order to make sure that the matzah is kosher, that same characteristic needs to apply to every mitzvah. Every opportunity. Don't put it off. Don't be lazy about it. Don't do it slowly. Don't procrastinate. Do it as quickly as you can. Do it as enthusiastically as you can. But this characteristic is not just haste. It's also care. It's also an understanding that a mitzvah is an opportunity to please God. A mitzvah is an opportunity to make myself a better person. And so I should want to do it, not just to do it minimally. I should want to do a mitzvah maximally, as quickly as possible, as beautifully as possible, with as much enthusiasm as possible. Because it matters. Not just what I do, but how I do it, how much effort I put into it. Rabbi Pesach Krohn tells the following story. So you know Rabbi Krohn, who's a wonderful person, a great speaker, is a Moel. And he lives in New York. And he tells the following story, that one day, he was supposed to do a bris in Far Rockaway. If you know New York, Far Rockaway is a suburb. It's a little bit far from Manhattan. It's near Kennedy Airport. He was supposed to do a bris in Far Rockaway. The problem was that the bris was delayed for one day. It was not going to be on the 8th day, but it was going to be on the 9th day because the baby had a little bit of jaundice. Not a lot of jaundice. It was not serious, but a little bit. And so they pushed off the bris for one day, which is what Jewish law says to do. So instead of the bris being on Thursday, they prepared for the bris on Friday, the 9th day of the baby's life. And they had a caterer, and they invited guests. Everything was arranged for Friday. Rabbi Pesach Krohn was going to be there on Friday, and everything is set up for Friday. Thursday afternoon, Rabbi Krohn is at another bris in New Jersey. And he gets a call from the father of this baby. And the father of the baby says, my wife just took our baby son to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said that the baby is healthy and could even have the bris today. So I want the bris right now, today, because the mitzvah, the ideal mitzvah, is to do the bris on the 8th day. Of course, if the baby is not healthy, we wait. But if the baby is healthy, you want to have the bris on the 8th day. Even though they had the caterer, they had invited people, they had prepared for it to be the next day. But the father is like in a panic. But if it's possible to do it on the 8th day, I want to do it on the 8th day. So you have to get over to the house right now. So Rabbi Krohn says to them, well, listen, here's the problem. The problem is right now I'm in New Jersey. So, and the Jewish law says that a bris has got to take place before sunset. It cannot take place at nighttime. It's got to take place during the day. So even if I started driving right now, I wouldn't make it by sunset till to get to your house. So it's not possible for me to be there. However, Father says, listen, it's no excuse. Because if it's possible to do it today, it's got to be today. There's just no option. That's the ideal mitzvah. And I'm not going to allow a second-rate mitzvah when I could have a first-rate mitzvah. We thought the baby was not healthy. Now that the baby is healthy, and it is the 8th day, and it's the ideal time, we're going to do it today. So Rabbi Krohn says, okay, fine, you're right. So here's what we're going to do. Let me give you the name of a moel that I know, another moel, who is in Far Rockaway, who lives in Far Rockaway. Call him, tell him to come over, he'll do the bris, and you'll have the bris on the 8th day. It's fine. So the father says, okay, that's a good plan. Would you please call my wife and tell her what you just told me and tell her to take care of it? So Mikron says, well, why don't you tell her yourself? He says, well, because I'm in Manhattan. I'm even further away than you are. So Rabbi Krohn says, wait a second, you mean to tell me that I should call your wife to call this other moel to have the bris for your son so that it takes place today before sunset and you're not going to be there? And the father says, yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And when my son grows up and my son says to me, Tati or Abba, where were you for my bris? I will say to him, I was in Manhattan and I could not get there in time. But it was more important that the mitzvah be done correctly. That's more important than I should have been there. And that's the lesson that I want you, my son, to learn from this. It's not only doing a mitzvah, it's how you do a mitzvah. It's the attention and the will to do it correctly. That's what Zrizas is. And that is what we're supposed to learn from Matza. And we learn that from the Kohanim. We learn that from this enthusiastic care and ability to take a product of flour and oil, which we don't have the ability to do, but to bake it in a way that it still remained matzah for the mincha offering. Okay, number 3. So our Parsha mostly deals with sacrifices, karbanos, sacrifices that were offered for various types of sins, mistakes. And the Torah has a kind of a formula. So if you want to look at the pages, I'll point it out to you. If you start on page 554, in the Stone Chumash, page 554, the bottom of the page, Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, pasuk number 1. Now number 2, Hashem said to Moshe, Daber b'nei Yisrael Lemor, tell the Jewish people, Nefesh ki sechet b'shkoga, if a person will sin by accident, then they bring this sacrifice. If a person sins by accident, then they bring a sacrifice. Take a look at next page, 556, pasuk number Gimel, top of the page. Im hakohen hamashiach yakata la'ashmas ha'am. If the anointed Kohen would sin, then there's a different Kohen. There's a different sacrifice that he offers. Okay, next page, 558. Pasuk Yagimel, also top of the page. V'im kol adas Yisrael yishku. If the entire Jewish people commits a sin, then there's a special sacrifice that they bring in that situation. Next page, page 560. Pasuk Chav Zayin. V'im nefesh achas techate b'shgoga. If a single individual will sin inadvertently, then this is the sacrifice they bring. So you have this formula repeated over and over, all kinds of scenarios, situations, different individuals. If they commit a sin, then this is the sacrifice that they bring. One exception. Please turn back to page 558. The one exception is the Nasi. Now, the Nasi, when the Jews were in the desert, was the head of each tribe. They were the 12 leaders of the Jewish people. Later, it would refer to the person who was the supreme leader of the Jewish people. And on page 558, Pasuk Chav Beis 22, near the bottom of the page, it does not say if the Nasi will commit a sin, this is the sacrifice he brings. It says, Asher Nasi Yekateh V'asa Achas, when the Nasi will sin, he will bring this sacrifice. Not if, but when. So the Siporno, one of the famous commentators, says that leaders make mistakes because power corrupts. And even if a person starts out as a good leader, a benevolent leader, but power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the Torah is simply teaching us a fact of life that leaders are, from time to time, going to let us down. Of course, there is a more benign explanation, and that is, and this is certainly true, even with the best of intentions, leaders will make mistakes. Even if they're not corrupt, even if they're trying to do what the right thing is, leaders make mistakes. It's inevitable. It's a fact of nature. It's going to happen. It does happen. There are no exceptions. However, here we have a very important lesson, because Rashi quotes the Medrash that looks at these words. One more time, 558 Pasuk Chav Beis. Asher Nasi Yechateh, when the Nasi will sin. The word Asher is very closely related to the word Ashrei. Ashrei, like the prayer Ashrei. It's not the same word, but our rabbis interpret it based on its similarity to this word. And the word Ashrei means praiseworthy. Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha. Praiseworthy are those who sit in your home. I've said this before. I had a great friend, an older gentleman, a European gentleman, who the words of Psalms were the rhythm of his life. I was once with him at a party, and neither of us was having a very good time. It was rather boring, and neither of us really wanted to be there. So I said to him, "Are you having a good time?" And he said to me, "Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha." Happy are those who stay at home. Okay, the pasuk in Tehillim is talking about staying in Hashem's house. All right, but the word asher nasi yechateh, when the prince will sin, is connected to the word ashrei, happy or praiseworthy. Says the Talmud, ashrei dor, happy is a generation, shemanhigav yavi chatas, that its leaders bring a sacrifice. Because remember, sacrifices were brought for unintentional sins, mistakes, accidents. You could have a lot of leaders and they could make a mistake and they don't want anyone to know. Or they blame it on somebody else. Praiseworthy is a generation where the leader is one who says, I'm responsible. I have to bring a carbon chatas. And remember, the whole system of sacrifices was voluntary. Nobody came to your door and said, you have to bring a sacrifice. A person voluntarily went to the Kohen and said, I've come to offer a sacrifice because I did this. It's self-guided. That means you have a leader who not only inevitably makes mistakes, but owns up to them, takes responsibility, comes forward, does whatever he or she can do to make it better. That's something that is really praiseworthy. There was a story about a very great Jewish leader who lived in the previous generation. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Kanievsky. He was known as the Stipler Rav. He lived in Bnei Brak. He was an outstanding scholar, but a very quiet, humble man. But during his later years, he was the Torah leader, certainly in Bnei Brak and in much of the Jewish world at that time. So it once happened that, of course, as such a well-known and respected Torah leader, every Shabbos in Bnei Brak, he was invited to 15 bar mitzvahs and 20 brises and 27 baby namings. And, and he could spend his whole time just going from one simcha to another. And as his years advanced, he had to cut back. He just didn't have the strength to do all that partying. Which is why his family was very surprised when, in his very later years, there was a bar mitzvah. And the bar mitzvah was not close by. And the bar mitzvah boy was not particularly close to the family. And yet, Rabbi Kanievsky insisted that he was going to this bar mitzvah. He walked slowly. It was a long distance. He went into the shul. The davening was already over. He went over to the boy. Everyone is watching because he's the most famous person and recognizable person in town. Everyone's watching, and everyone's wondering, what in the world is the Stipler Rav doing at this bar mitzvah? What's the connection? He doesn't go out to bar mitzvahs. And the Stipler Rav walks over to the boy and he whispers in his ear. Nobody can hear what he says. And after a couple of minutes, the boy says to him, no, it's all right. And then the Stipler left. So clearly that's not the typical rabbi drop by, where you walk in, you walk over to the boy, say, Mazel Tov, I'm sure you did a great job. You go over to the parents, you should have a lot of nachas, you take a piece of kugel, and then you go home because you have other places to go. That's the typical rabbi drop by. I don't want to give away too many secrets, but that's what we normally do. Everyone's wondering, what was he whispering? What was going on? So here's the story. 6 years before, so that means that the boy was 7 years old. That boy happened to be davening in the same shul as the Stipler Rav. on a given Shabbos. And that boy, in the middle of davening, had a siddur, and it was somehow a very, very large siddur. It was so large, it didn't look like a siddur. It looked like maybe a Gemara, like a volume of Talmud. And so the boy is sitting in shul with this oversized book in front of him. And the stipler walked over to this boy, this is 7 years earlier, walked over to this boy, and he said, Yingala, little boy, he said, now is the time for davening. It's not the time for learning Talmud. Why don't you put away the Gemara and take out a siddur? So the boy says to him, but Rebbe, he shows him, it is a siddur. I am davening. It is a siddur. It's just that it's bigger than usual. So the stipler felt very bad because he was gentle. He didn't say anything not nice, but he had said something critical and he was wrong. So he apologized. He repeated himself, and he felt very badly that he had said something a little bit insensitive to this boy. Okay. The boy said it was okay 7 years ago. He forgave him. It was no big deal. Everyone went home. Everybody forgot about the story. The boy for sure forgot about the story. But the stipler did not forget about the story. Because 7 years later, on the day of this boy's bar mitzvah, the stipler walked all the way across Bnei Brak in order to meet the boy at his bar mitzvah and to whisper in his ear to say to him, I am sorry for what I said to you 7 years ago when I thought you were holding a Gemara and not a siddur. Because, according to Jewish law, a minor does not have the capacity, for example, to enter into a business transaction. A minor does not also does not have the capacity legally to forgive someone. That's only on achieving majority, which is on the day of bar mitzvah. And the stipler remembered that he needed to ask forgiveness. And he made note of that day, and he made a point on that day to go to see that boy to ask again for forgiveness on the first day that the boy would be able to forgive in a legally binding manner because he was now bar mitzvah. That's what it means. Ashrei Dor. Happy is a generation, praiseworthy is a generation where its leaders hold themselves accountable. And yes, there will inevitably be mistakes. But great leaders do not hide them, do not blame others. They take responsibility. And that is the greatness of them. Okay, I want to share just one more piece, very short. So obviously, the subject of our Parsha, the subject of the sacrifices, except for the is not practically relevant to us because we do not have sacrifices, except for the fact that we do learn the law about how to bake matzah so that it's not chametz. That is practical, but the rest of it, we're reading about a sin offering and a thanksgiving offering and a peace offering, but we do not have these things. Yet, we've discussed this before. Once the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed and there are no more sacrifices, there is a transformation. And the subject matter, the passages that we read in this week's Parsha become transformed into passages in our siddur, in our prayer book. And we recite on a daily basis these paragraphs that describe the sacrifices. And every morning we say, after we have said in our prayers the paragraph describing the sacrifices, we say the following words in the siddur. May it be your will, Hashem, our God and God of our fathers. shetehei amirazu, that our saying the words of describing the sacrifices, chashuva umukubelas umurutz lefanecha, should be accepted by you, ki'ilu hikravnu karban b'ma'ado b'mkomo kichaso, as if we ourselves offered the sacrifice in real life. We can't offer the sacrifice in real life. Instead, we're going to say the words of the sacrifice. We ask you, Hashem, to accept the words as if we had offered the sacrifice. So we've spoken about this before, the way in which prayer takes on the role of the sacrifices, and this promise that our rabbis tell us God first made to Avraham, where God said to Avraham, even if there will be no sacrifices, if you will simply say the description of the sacrifice, I will accept it as if you offered a sacrifice. The Maharal, one of the great commentators, asked the following question. He says, that's a very strange thing. It does not appear for any other mitzvah. I mean, nobody says that, listen, I don't want to observe Shabbos this week, but instead of observing Shabbos, I'm going to study the volume in the Talmud that discusses the laws of Shabbos, and then just accept that, Hashem, as if I observe Shabbos. Or, I don't want to have a Pesach Seder this year because it's too much trouble and I want to be by myself, so I'm just going to skip it, but I'm going to learn about the Pesach Seder, and I want you to accept it as if I actually did it. There's no mitzvah like that. It doesn't work like that. You have to do the mitzvah. How is it in this one area only, there is this strange concept where if I simply say the words of what I ought to have done, God will accept it as if I did the action? And the Maharal explains, because the goal of a sacrifice, of a karban, which is communicated by the root word of karban, which means karav, to come close, it is a ritual that is intended to bring us closer to God. Karav, lekarev, to bring us closer to God. Prayer does the same thing. So that when I say words in prayer and I'm communicating directly with God, that is, in fact, the goal that the sacrifices have. The reason God will accept describing the sacrifices as if I had offered them is because when I am describing them in prayer, I am doing the same thing that the actual sacrifices accomplish. And that's why that substitution works. And the substitution also works for the study of Torah. When we study Torah, we bring ourselves closer to God. Now, obviously, the study of Torah is an intellectual exercise. We discuss concepts. It could be more basic. It could be more advanced. There are different styles of studying Torah. But it is, after all, an intellectual activity. You can agree, you can disagree. However, our rabbis tell us, Afilu echad yoshev v'osek b'Torah, even if a person is by themselves and they study words of Torah, Shechina, Shruya, the divine presence of God rests on that person. The study of Torah has the ability not only to act as an intellectual exercise, but to act as an ecstatic experience, to use the phrase of Rav Yosef Soloveitchik of blessed memory. An ecstatic experience where one meets God. It is a mystical experience. It is a transcendent experience, far beyond simply intellectual. And that's the equation between sacrifices, karbanos, prayer, and Torah. The three of them have the same goal. There will be people this year who perhaps for the first time in their lives will be having the Pesach Seder by themselves. As said before, if that is a situation, a person should feel that they are fulfilling God's commandment, to be exceedingly careful with our health, to protect your health and the health of others. And we go through an abnormal situation in order, hopefully, to be able to observe Pesach the way it should be observed many times in the future. When a person is sitting by themselves, who asks Manishtana? I discussed this last night. The Talmud says if a person is having the Seder by themselves, I ask myself Manishtana. I ask myself the 4 questions. Because remember, Manishtana, asking the questions and giving the answer, is also part of Torah study. We're studying the events that are described in the Torah. And we have a promise from the rabbis in the Talmud. Shechina, Shruya, God's presence rests on that person even when they are alone. Who hears you asking the question? God hears. Because when you're studying Torah, you are never alone.